Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
When Daniel met Olivia, he felt like he was standing in front of someone who shined effortlessly. There was something about her that drew attention, as if the room got brighter every time she walked in. She smiled easily, knew how to entertain any group with her exaggerated stories and dramatic way of speaking. She seemed to have an endless supply of energy. Daniel was the opposite, quiet, reserved, the kind of person who'd rather listen than talk. But maybe that difference was exactly what brought them together. He watched her, fascinated, and she enjoyed being admired by someone so calm. During the first few months, they lived like they were in a well-written, light-hearted movie. She took him to places he'd never have gone on his own. He made her slow down, reminded her of the importance of rest, simple routines, long talks after dinner. Olivia loved planning weekend getaways, suggesting last-minute trips to small towns or trendy big cities. Daniel worried about logistics, money, the practical details she always forgot. What started as a well-rehearsed dance between two different personalities slowly turned into imbalance. They moved in together after 2 years. The apartment was small, but there was enough room for both of them. Olivia took over the living room with her decorating ideas, inspirational quote posters, and plants that never lasted long. Daniel adjusted his habits to fit the new routine, made space in the cabinets, rearranged his schedule for the activities she liked. At first, it felt like love. It felt like care. But over time, he realized he was always adapting, always giving in, always trying not to cause any trouble. Meanwhile, she stayed exactly the same. Marriage came naturally. It was an intimate ceremony, surrounded only by the people who truly mattered to them. That day, Daniel looked at Olivia and was certain he'd made the right choice. She looked beautiful, and he believed that despite their differences, they worked. And they did, for a while. Olivia loved posting pictures of them on trips, smiling with wine glasses or feet in the sand. Daniel smiled in the photos, but carried the weight of keeping that life going, the bills, the commitments, the sacrifices. Over the years, the days got quieter. Her good mood started showing up more around friends than with him. The jokes stopped being funny at home. She went out often for events, motivational talks, work gatherings, while Daniel stayed late at the office, always saying he needed to keep everything in order. Their bedtime conversations turned into monologues or tired grumbles. Sometimes, she didn't even sleep there. She'd say she was at a retreat, a course, something that would transform her energy. Daniel pretended to believe her. Not because he was naive, but because he was exhausted. He'd tried talking, tried creating space for her to say what she really felt. But Olivia always gave vague answers, made jokes to ease the tension, or simply changed the subject. Slowly, he started emotionally detaching. He got used to her absence, the untouched meals in the fridge, the messages left via text instead of face-to-face. The house was full of things, but empty of presence. Intimacy had become convenience. They shared the same space, but lived in different worlds. Despite all this, Daniel believed it was just a phase. Maybe they were both just tired, each lost in their own responsibilities. He held on to the good memories, the days they laughed at silly things, the habit of making faces at each other in traffic. But it had been a long time since any of that happened. Olivia no longer asked about his day. She didn't suggest movies to watch together. When she spoke, it was about the discoveries she made on her solo adventures, new authors, new philosophies, new spiritual practices. Everything seemed new to her, except her own husband. The turning point wasn't a fight, a discovered betrayal, or a scandal. It was something even harsher, the indifference that settled between them. Olivia started treating him like someone too predictable, too settled, unable to keep up with her growth. Daniel, in turn, buried himself in work, came home later and later, and settled for the bare minimum. Sometimes, they'd pass in the hallway without saying a word. Friends who once admired the couple began quietly commenting that something seemed off. But no one really knew what. One night, during a silent dinner, Daniel watched her as she typed on her phone and laughed to herself. He didn't ask who she was talking to, didn't make a comment. He just kept eating. He felt like he'd become a background character in his own life. Was he angry? Sometimes. But most of the time, he just wanted the emptiness to end. The love they once had didn't vanish all at once. It faded like a candle forgotten in a corner. Until all that was left was the smell of smoke. And an uncomfortable certainty that something was coming. Something that would change everything. It was supposed to be an ordinary night. A simple dinner, prepared almost on autopilot. Daniel had gone to the market, like he did every Tuesday, bought the usual ingredients, and returned home. Olivia was there, sitting at the table, scrolling on her phone. She didn't even look at what he brought. He didn't mention it, just put everything in place, washed his hands, and started cooking. He knew what she liked, the right doneness, the exact seasoning. He still cared, even if it seemed like it no longer mattered to her. During the meal, the silence was the same as on other nights. They chewed slowly, avoiding any attempt at conversation. Daniel had long given up trying to start a topic. Olivia seemed more and more distant, as if she were already living somewhere else. But that night, between bites, with no emotion in her voice, she said, "I'm leaving tonight." She kept her eyes on her phone. The words came out like she was reading a random message. Daniel stared at her for a few seconds but didn't say anything right away. He waited for some kind of explanation, something to show it was a joke or an exaggeration. But she just kept typing. He put his utensils down and stayed seated. He watched every move she made, like someone trying to understand a scene from a movie that didn't make sense. Olivia finally looked up, as if just confirming what she'd said. "Everything's ready. I'm just waiting for a car." That explained her behavior over the past few days. The late-night outings, the suitcases that disappeared and reappeared in the closet, the complete withdrawal even from simple tasks. It hadn't been impulsive. Everything had been carefully planned. The decision had been made a long time ago, but she chose for him to find out in the coldest way possible. Daniel took a deep breath. In another time, maybe he would have begged. Maybe he would have tried to understand, asked why, suggested couples therapy, reminded her of the good times. But he had no energy left to fight. What had kept him going until then was just habit. And when that habit broke with those words, the only thing he felt was relief. The end, finally spoken out loud. It was like a weight had lifted off his shoulders. He replied with a simple, "Okay." He didn't ask where she was going or who she was with. He finished what was on his plate, got up, and put the leftovers away. Olivia left minutes later. She took a rolling suitcase, the car key, and her phone. She didn't look back. No note, no message, no explanation. Silence took her place, stronger than ever. While many would have expected a scandal, Daniel just sat on the couch, opened his laptop, and logged into his banking apps. In minutes, he cancelled the cards under her name, blocked her access to the health plan, and stopped scheduled transfers. He also disabled the data plan linked to his account. All done calmly, without bitterness. This wasn't revenge. It was consistency. Olivia had decided to leave, and she took the connection with her. To Daniel, it made sense that the benefits that came with marriage should also end. After that, he made coffee and went to read. He went to bed early, without feeling the discomfort of someone who'd lost something precious. Because what they had was already lost long before. Now, at least, the end had a name, a date, and a time. And with that, he could reorganize his life. The next few days were surprisingly light. He worked normally, ate out, reclaimed the house as his own space. No more clutter, no strong perfumes in the bedroom, no noises in the middle of the night. For the first time in a long time, the house felt peaceful. When he told a coworker that Olivia had left, the reaction was shock. But Daniel spoke so calmly that the topic quickly faded. He turned down invitations to vent, preferring to keep the feeling of freedom to himself. There was no room inside him for regret. The cycle had closed. And to his surprise, the pain he expected never came. He thought of Olivia sometimes, but without hate or sadness. He thought of her like someone remembering a book they've read, a song that marked a time but lost its charm. He felt more curiosity than longing. He wondered why she chose to leave that way, without an honest conversation. Why she planned everything in silence, like an escape. But he chose not to seek answers. The lack of dialogue in the last months had already made it clear there was no connection left. Daniel moved forward. Careful, methodical, as always. He updated his documents, reset passwords, adjusted the budget. Nothing dramatic. Just necessary. Deep down, he knew Olivia expected a different reaction. Maybe a plea for her to stay, an impulsive gesture, a final effort to save them. But Daniel understood clearly that loving alone is like rowing without water. And he was already exhausted from moving without going anywhere. So when she left, he didn't try to stop her. Because in a way, that was exactly what he needed too, someone to finally put an end to what he'd already started burying in silence. On the morning of the third day after Olivia left, Daniel was sorting emails when the intercom rang. She asked to come up, her voice impatient. He hesitated but let her in. Minutes later, Olivia walked in with her hair messily tied up and an expression somewhere between indignation and urgency. She threw her bag on the couch and crossed her arms. She was clearly angry. She said she needed to talk to him immediately. Daniel stayed calm. He asked if she wanted water or coffee. She refused. She got straight to the point. The night before, she'd gone out to dinner with Julian, a former coworker she'd been talking to regularly for months. During the meal, she asked for the check and, when trying to pay, was surprised when her card was declined. She tried another. Same result. The server waited, her expression shifting from neutral to awkward. Julian had to pay. More than the embarrassment, what hit her was the feeling of helplessness. Until that moment, she believed that even after leaving, she still controlled the situation. She realized then that her world was no longer part of Daniel's. And that hurt her pride. She wanted explanations. She demanded to know why he'd done that. She said it was petty, unnecessary, immature. That his decision had exposed her. That she had plans, commitments, a life built. Daniel listened carefully, without interrupting. When she finished, he simply said that once someone decides to leave, they also take the consequences of that decision. She wanted freedom, now she'd have to pay for it. Olivia refused to accept it. She started yelling that everything he did was calculated. She said he wanted to see her suffer. That he was acting controlling. That he'd always been cold, distant, predictable. Daniel didn't react. He just said she could insult him all she wanted, but no insult would change the fact that she'd left without looking back. That she'd packed in silence, called a ride, planned every step in advance. And from that moment on, he'd choose his own steps too. And he chose not to finance her. That same week, indirect messages started coming. Mutual friends sent texts asking if he was okay, saying Olivia seemed regretful, confused. One even asked him to reactivate her card at least until she got back on her feet. His reply was short, "That's not my responsibility anymore." Days later, Olivia's brother showed up outside the building. He wanted to talk. Said he was there as family, asking Daniel to be more understanding. Claimed she'd left in the heat of the moment, hadn't planned anything with another man, that maybe there was still a chance to reconcile. Daniel listened, but stayed firm. He explained that she stopped being his priority the moment she treated the end like a simple announcement. That until then, he'd covered everything: trips, credit cards, health plan, phone, and now, each should handle their own life. The brother left disappointed. Said Daniel was being too harsh. Daniel just replied that if she wanted a fresh start, she should do it for real. On her own 2 feet. A few days later, messages from Olivia started arriving through money transfer apps. One said, "I need help, it's temporary." Another, "You know I'm still adjusting." The amounts weren't high, but the pattern was the same: requests without conversation, without dialogue, without declared regret. Just the automatic gesture of someone who always assumed someone else would fix things for her. Daniel ignored them. Not out of bitterness, but because he knew exactly what cycle would form if he gave in. If he helped once, she'd come back every time life got tough. The following week, a legal notice arrived. Olivia had hired a lawyer and was demanding financial support. She claimed she'd been dependent on him during the marriage and now needed time to stabilize. The petition asked for temporary alimony, housing assistance, and even reimbursement for expenses she claimed to have covered for shared assets. Daniel wasn't surprised. He'd expected some formal move. And he was ready. He gathered all the bank records from the past years. Showed that her card was supplementary to his account, that the phone was in his name, that the car was bought by him before marriage, that the house was solely in his name. He took all the proof to his lawyer, who prepared a precise response. Stated that the transfers made during the marriage were voluntary, with no contract or obligation. That she had unilaterally abandoned the marital home. And that there were signs Olivia had been in a relationship with someone else before leaving. Daniel's lawyer attached social media screenshots, public chat logs between Olivia and Julian, event check-in dates, and even neighbor statements confirming she'd been frequently absent in the weeks before the separation. The alimony request was quickly dismissed. The judge saw no basis to grant anything beyond the division of a few movable items she still claimed. The rest was archived. Olivia tried to appeal, but her arguments were weak. In court, she looked defeated. Julian didn't show up. Daniel watched everything quietly. He never raised his voice, never responded aggressively, never tried to expose private details. He just let the facts speak for themselves. And they spoke clearly. What was left between them was now just bureaucracy. Emotions no longer played a role. She tried to flip the script, but her coldness at the moment of leaving still echoed too loudly for any reconciliation, legal, emotional, or symbolic. Daniel had already stopped being the man who gave in. And Olivia, for the first time in a long time, had to face reality without the safety net she always assumed would be there. It took another 2 months before Olivia showed up again. She called first, no small talk. Said she was coming to get her things. She wanted everything that was hers. She didn't ask permission. Just informed him. Daniel replied that he'd be home and she could come by, as long as she brought someone with her. He didn't want drama or misunderstandings. It was her right, yes, but he wouldn't let the moment turn into another scene. It was just the final part of a closure already in motion. At the agreed time, Olivia arrived with Julian. She avoided Daniel's gaze, but the other man stared at him, as if to make it clear he was there for her, a new protector. Daniel kept a neutral expression. He'd already sorted everything. The items were packed, labeled, organized into boxes clearly marked with their contents. Clothes, books, personal items, accessories. Nothing beyond what the lawyer had listed as exclusively hers. Things that once represented the intimacy of a couple now seemed like mere cargo. Objects taking up space. Julian looked at the boxes, then back at Daniel, and made a sarcastic comment about how efficient he'd been. Daniel didn't respond at all. He let the lack of reaction be the answer. Olivia seemed uneasy with the silence between them. At another time, that might have sparked an argument. Now, it was just the echo of a relationship that no longer made sense. Julian's presence made everything more theatrical. He made a point of moving around as if protecting Olivia, as if she were a victim returning to a traumatic scene. But the truth was, he was the one most visibly uncomfortable. The awkwardness of being in that house, surrounded by memories that weren't his, with a man who clearly ignored him as if he were invisible. There was no room for conflict. Daniel didn't want Olivia back, and that seemed to be the biggest frustration for the man who'd come trying to prove otherwise. They took the boxes. Nothing was left. The house, once so full of contrasts, now felt clean. Daniel ended that day with the feeling of a task completed. There was no sadness. No immediate relief either. It was a page turned quietly, without dramatic explosion. Days later, he called the realtor and put the property up for sale. It no longer made sense to keep that space. He bought a smaller, well-located, practical apartment. It was the start of a new chapter, without the weight of the past. As he organized his new place, he found out Olivia had gotten a job at a cosmetics store. She'd aimed for a higher position, but without specific qualifications and with an unstable history, she had to accept a customer service role. She was seen a few times at a mall, arranging shelves and demonstrating products. Julian disappeared from her social media. Mutual friends mentioned, without details, that he'd pulled away after the court hearing. Apparently, the relationship fell apart quickly when illusion gave way to reality. Daniel listened from a distance, no longer involved. He didn't wish her harm, but he also had no room inside to feel compassion for someone who'd tried to hurt him. He preferred to look ahead. He reorganized his routine, picked up old hobbies, resumed long walks, enrolled in an online course. He used the free time to rediscover who he was when no one demanded anything from him, when no relationship pressured him to maintain two worlds. For the first time in many years, he didn't need to explain himself. His only obligation was to himself. Close friends noticed the change. There was more lightness in how he spoke, more pause in his decisions. He started going out more, not out of need, but desire. He reconnected with old colleagues, picked up conversations he'd put on hold. At one gathering, someone remarked how different he seemed. Daniel replied that, for the first time, he felt whole. No anxiety, no waiting, no demands that masked neglect. He reflected in silence on how it all happened, without shouting, without obvious betrayals, without public scandals. What destroyed the marriage was indifference, lack of care, absence of reciprocity. It was the silence between two people who stopped seeing each other. Olivia had the chance to keep what they'd built, but chose another path, and that was fine. Daniel just learned to value what couldn't be bought: respect, emotional stability, and the peace of lying down without owing anything to his own conscience. When he signed the sale of the old house, it felt like officially closing a chapter. He walked out to the balcony of his new apartment, watched the city in motion, and smiled. He had less space, fewer belongings, fewer obligations. And yet, he'd never felt so free. He finally understood that true victory wasn't about punishing anyone or proving he was right. It was about starting over with dignity, without needing the other's downfall to rise. Months later, while organizing his files, he found an old video Olivia had saved on an external hard drive. It was from one of their early marriage trips. She was dancing in a local restaurant, and he was watching her with that goofy look of someone who believes love is enough. He watched it to the end, closed the file, and deleted it. That memory belonged to a time that was behind him. Holding onto it would only feed a nostalgia that no longer fit in his new life. That night, before going to bed, he wrote a sentence in a notebook on his nightstand: "When someone decides to leave without looking back, the greatest response you can give is to move forward without needing to be seen." And that's what he did. Because some stories don't need revenge, just a dignified ending. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.